My sister looked right at me during the will reading and said, "A failure like you doesn't deserve Dad's inheritance." Then she added, "He'd be ashamed of what you've turned into," and everyone else nodded like it was a fact. I didn't argue. I just got up and left. 72 hours later, every single one of them wished they'd kept their mouths shut. Silas's office felt like a pressure cooker, tense and suffocating. Maybe it was those dark mahogany walls pressing in on us, or maybe it was the way Dad's leather chair still sat at the head of the desk, like he just stepped out to grab a coffee and would be back any minute. Elise, my sister, kept glancing at her watch, same nervous tick she'd had since we were kids. She used to do that when we were waiting for Dad to come home and check our report cards. Some habits don't die with age. Truth is, I wasn't even supposed to be here today. Silas's email came out of nowhere last night and threw me completely off balance. He'd written, "Richard specifically requested your presence. 3 whole years since I left the family business and walked away from that life. And now I'm summoned back for my father's will reading." "Let's get started," Silas said, clearing his throat and nudging up those wire-rimmed glasses he's worn to every holiday dinner since I was a teenager. Richard gave very detailed instructions on how this should be handled. He added, "My mother sat quietly in the corner, hands folded like she was bracing for something. She hadn't spoken much since Dad passed, but when I walked into the room, her eyes followed me in a way that stuck. There was something in that look. Was it fear? Hope? Maybe even guilt? I couldn't pin it down." Clara, my younger sister, was typing furiously on her phone. Knowing her, she was probably texting her team about another late start to her day. She made partner last year, youngest in her firm's history. Dad was so proud he bought her a brand new Mercedes on the spot. So when Silas began with, "First, Richard wanted me to read this letter," we all turned toward him. He pulled out a yellowed envelope, edges frayed with age. My breath caught the second I saw the handwriting. Dad's script, I would have recognized it anywhere. He was stubborn about writing things by hand, refused to touch a computer if he didn't have to. Even in the age of smartphones, he stayed loyal to his fountain pen. "To my family," Silas read aloud. "If you're hearing this, it means I've finally run out of time to make things right, and Lord knows I made more mistakes than I care to admit." Elise sat up straighter in her seat. She'd taken over Dad's company after his diagnosis, micromanaging every inch of it like she thought she could channel him through her spreadsheets. Silas continued, "My deepest regret is letting my pride cloud my judgment." And then came the line that knocked the air out of me. Success isn't about following the expected path. It's about having the courage to create your own. I felt the shift in the room. Every eye turned in my direction. 3 years ago, I walked away from my role as VP in Dad's company to start a tech venture. He called it a betrayal, said I was spitting on our family's legacy. After that, we barely spoke. The rest of the letter went on about legacy and values, but my brain got stuck on that one word, courage. That wasn't a word Dad ever used for me before. Not once. Then Silas moved on to the practical stuff. The company went to Elise, of course. She'd been groomed for it since she could walk. Clara got the investment properties and family portfolios. Mom received the house and her existing trusts. Then came the part that really shifted the air. And to my son, Miles, Silas paused, taking a moment to adjust his glasses again. "Oh, get on with it," Elise snapped. We all know Miles gave up his right to anything meaningful when he bailed on the family. Silas didn't flinch. "Actually," he said, "Richard left Miles his private study, along with all the contents, documents, belongings, and personal effects." Dead silence followed. That study had been off limits our entire lives. 40 years. And not a single one of us was allowed inside without Dad standing there. Even Mom hadn't stepped foot in there since the funeral. "That's it," Clara laughed. "A room full of dusty papers? Please." Elise stood up, eyes burning. "A failure like you doesn't deserve Dad's inheritance," she repeated, venom thick in her voice. "He'd be sick to see what you've become, walking away from everything he built for what? Some ridiculous startup fantasy." Around the room, heads nodded again, all except Mom. She stared down at her hands. I noticed a slight tremble in her fingers. "Richard was clear," Silas added. "The study must remain untouched until Miles claims it. No one else is permitted entry." "This is absurd," Elise snapped. "Dad wasn't thinking straight at the end. We all know it. Miles left us he doesn't deserve." I pushed back my chair slowly. The scrape against the hardwood cut through her rant like a blade. I didn't say a word as I walked toward the door. "That's right," Clara called after me. "Run away again. You're good at that." At the doorway, I paused, my hand resting on the handle. Through the glass, I saw Dad's old parking spot, still empty. He used to park crooked on purpose, said it brought him luck. Funny how little things like that come back and hit you harder than the big ones. "Silas," I said without turning, "when can I pick up the key to the study?" "Tomorrow morning," he replied. There was something in his voice. Anticipation, maybe? Or hesitation. "Miles, don't you dare." Elise started, but I didn't wait to hear the rest. I shut the door behind me. I leaned back against the hallway wall and let out a breath I hadn't even realized I was holding. Dad's study. His one private fortress. The only room in the house he never let anyone else touch or influence. My phone buzzed. A message from my technical co-founder lit up the screen. "Hey, any progress with those potential investors? They're into the prototype. Can you look over the pitch deck today?" I smiled a little, pushing myself off the wall. Dad's study could wait one more day. Right now, I had a business to run. What I didn't know yet was that the inheritance I thought was pointless would turn everything upside down. But that's for later, after I figure out what 4 decades of my father's secrets look like. Update 1. Before I get into it, thank you for all the love on my last post. Didn't think it would blow up like that. A lot of you asked what happened with Dad's study. So here we go. The key felt heavier than I expected. Not physically, just emotionally off somehow. At 7 in the morning, I stood in front of the study door, coffee in one hand, eyes locked on the old brass handle like it might suddenly come alive and bite me. The house was quiet. Mom was still asleep. She'd been staying in bed later ever since Dad passed. The only sound came from the grandfather clock in the hallway, ticking like nothing had changed. I slipped the key into the lock. It turned with a soft click that echoed a little too loud in the silence. The door creaked open in that exact way I remembered from childhood. Same familiar moan Dad always insisted not to fix. He called it his built-in alarm system, so he'd know when we tried to sneak in his kids. The study looked untouched. Same dark leather sofa pushed against the wall, smooth and creased exactly where he used to sit. Bookshelves from floor to ceiling, arranged in whatever cryptic system only he could navigate. On the desk sat his reading glasses, right beside a half-full coffee mug. Lipstick mark faint on the rim. Mom must have brought in that cup, his last one. I set mine down and moved toward the desk. The leather chair still had a dent where his body used to rest. I ran my fingers along the edge of the mahogany, smooth and cold, remembering all the times I'd stood across from him, updating him on my grades, my career, the day I told him I was leaving the family business. Then I noticed it, something poking out from beneath the corner of his desk calendar. I lifted it, my breath caught. It was a printout of my company's homepage, dated just 2 weeks before he died. Red ink filled the margins, his handwriting unmistakable. Smart market entry, innovative fix for scalability, explore partnership with. The name was smudged, but the intent was clear. My hand started shaking as I lifted the calendar away completely. Underneath was a whole stack of documents, market research, competitive breakdowns, financial forecasts, all about my startup, all covered in his notes. In the bottom drawer, tucked behind a row of his usual files, I found a leather-bound journal. The first page was dated the day after I left the family business. Miles walked away today. Elise says he's lost it. Clara agrees. But I remember being 29, wanted to do my own thing. I was a coward back then, follow my father's footsteps instead. Maybe the entry just stopped there. I flipped through more pages, page after page. He'd been following my company's progress, tracking our wins, analyzing our choices, not like a bitter dad, like an investor, one who actually cared. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Elise. "Mom said you're in the study. Don't touch anything until the will's reviewed. We're contesting it." I ignored the message and kept searching the drawers. That's when I found it, a USB stick labeled Miles, Strategy Review 2024. I pulled out my laptop from my bag and plugged it in. The drive opened up to folders, tons of them, years of compiled research, industry forecasts, tech trend analyses, and something else, video files. I opened the most recent one. Dad's face filled the screen. He looked tired but focused, eyes sharp, voice steady. "Miles," he said, "if you're watching this, I didn't get the chance to say it out loud. Your sisters think I was angry when you left. Truth is, I was scared. Scared you'd succeed in ways I couldn't. Scared because you were brave enough to choose your own path." He paused, coughed, took a sip of water. But I've been watching. You're building something real, something that could change not just your life, but the legacy I left behind. I never told you this, but I never stopped being proud of you. Bottom left drawer, false panel. The code is your mom's birthday. What you'll find in there, let's just say I didn't keep everything in the family trust. Another buzz, this time from Clara. Miles, be reasonable. Dad wasn't thinking clearly before the end. Let's work out a fair split. I didn't even respond. I reached down to the drawer. My fingers felt the edge of the panel. The story wasn't over, not even close. Mom's birthday, May 12th, 62. That was the code. I typed it in, and the hidden panel clicked open. Inside was a thick folder stamped contingency strategy. 2024, along with stacks of stock certificates and crisp labeled documents. I sat down and started reading, thinking I'd skim through quickly, but I didn't come up for air for 3 solid hours. My coffee was still where I'd left it, untouched and cold. The sun had already shifted across the study window, and its soft glow cast new shadows across Dad's desk. My phone screen lit up. 15 missed calls, Elise, Clara, their lawyers, over and over again. But none of that mattered now. What Dad left behind wasn't just old files and dusty memories. It was something bigger. A plan, a master blueprint, carefully crafted for a future everyone else had ignored. While people labeled him old-fashioned and rigid, he'd been working in silence, laying the groundwork for a transformation. One where my so-called unrealistic startup wasn't a departure from the family's legacy, but the key to its survival. Then the doorbell rang, probably Elise and her team, ready for war. Let them wait. I needed more time to process everything, to wrap my head around what Dad had truly built, because this wasn't just about money or inheritance anymore. This was about purpose. And more than anything, it was clear now, Dad had never doubted me. He hadn't been disappointed. He'd been betting on me all along. My phone buzzed again, a message from Mom. He spent every evening in that study after you left. Said he was studying the future. Now I know what he meant. Be careful with your sisters, honey, but be brave too. I glanced back at Dad's empty coffee mug, sitting next to a stack of papers that revealed years of quiet observation and strategic planning. Every note he made, every annotated report, it all pointed toward one thing. He hadn't been trying to pull me back into his world. He was guiding me forward into mine in a way that wove our paths together. The lawyers could wait until tomorrow. Tonight, I had reading to do. He'd left me a roadmap, and I was starting to see where it led. Then another ping, Silas this time. Your father told me to wait until you found everything in the study. Then I was to pass along this message. The future belongs to those who build it. He made me promise. Now I understand why. And soon enough, Elise and Clara would understand too. More updates coming because trust me, things are only just getting started. Update 2. Apologies for the delay between posts. These last 2 weeks have been a lot. Many of you asked what exactly I found in Dad's study and how things went down with my sisters. Here's where we are now. It was my 3rd night straight going through Dad's files, and the study looked like a crime scene of paperwork. That's when Mom walked in, holding a mug of coffee. Her hand trembled a bit as she set it down. You look just like him, she said softly, sitting there with all those documents, trying to solve some mystery no one else even knows exists. And she was right. It was a puzzle, but one that stretched across years, maybe decades. Dad's research didn't just track my company, it mapped out a future that would reshape everything our family built. A few minutes later, Mom said, your sisters are here, no lawyers this time, just Elise and Clara, waiting in the kitchen, faces tight, like they weren't sure if they were walking into a meeting or a minefield. The smell of cinnamon rolls hung in the air. Mom's peace offering. Elise spoke first, voice less sharp than usual. We need to talk about the company's quarterly results. I didn't say anything, just sat across from them, letting them make the first move. Clara slid a tablet toward me. The numbers were worse than expected. The business was bleeding clients, losing ground to faster, leaner competitors. Elise finally admitted, the board's getting nervous. And now you think Dad left me the study because I might be able to pull us out with my little startup fantasy? I asked. Clara scowled. Don't be smug. We're here to talk like adults. That's when I pulled out the real ace, the strategy document Dad had written 2 years ago, his full transformation plan. Did either of you know he'd been working on this? I asked. Judging by their blank stares, the answer was no. I kept going, laying out everything. His notes, annotated reports, projections, and how he'd tracked emerging market trends years before the shift even began. Every page proved one thing. He wasn't out of touch, he saw exactly what was coming. He wasn't interested in my company because he was worried. I said, he saw how it could complete what he'd been building. Elise looked stunned. Why didn't he just tell us? From the hallway, Mom's voice cut in. Because he wanted you to figure it out. He always believed the lessons that matter most are the ones you learn on your own. She joined us at the table, something in her posture softer than usual. Your father was proud of all of you, Elise, for holding on to tradition, Clara, for your sharp strategy, and Miles, for taking the risk he never could. I added, those stock certificates hidden in the panel? They're not just investments, they're carefully chosen assets. Key tech, strategic leverage points, all part of a bigger plan. Clara picked up one of the reports, scanning it like a contract. This could actually work, the structure is sound, even the regulatory risks are addressed. But the board won't go for it. Elise said they'll fight this kind of change. I grinned. You might want to check the blue folder. Dad consolidated voting rights over the last 5 years. If we work together, we can override them. Elise narrowed her eyes. Together? After all this? Read his final letter, I said. Success isn't about following a well-worn path. It's about having the guts to carve your own. And Dad hadn't just met me. Mom stood slowly, collecting our empty mugs. Richard always said his greatest achievement wasn't the business, she murmured. It was raising 3 kids stubborn enough to fight for what they believed in, even if that meant fighting each other sometimes. The kitchen fell still, just the quiet clatter of her loading the dishwasher, such an ordinary sound, marking such a turning point. The board meets next week, Elise finally said. If we're going through with this, everything has to be airtight, Clara added, her tone shifting back into strategist mode. I opened my laptop and slid it between us. I've got some ideas. Dad left detailed notes on the integration phases. I think we start there. We spent hours at that kitchen table, the empty cinnamon roll plate between us like a forgotten trophy, laying the groundwork for something new, not just preserving Dad's legacy, but evolving it into what he'd quietly seen coming all along. That afternoon, Silas stopped by with another stack of Dad's files. He took one look at us, sleeves rolled up, minds synced, finally aligned, and smiled. He told me to give you this once you figure it out. He said, handed me an envelope, said you'd know when it was time. Inside was a single handwritten page from Dad, but I didn't read it, not yet. I'd share it after the board meeting. Things were moving fast now, faster than any of us expected. Mom had been right all along. Dad's legacy wasn't just the company. It was a reminder that sometimes you have to break apart first to see what you're truly capable of building together. The board meeting was just 3 days away, and we need every second to get it right. More soon. Final update. What a week. You might have seen the headlines already about the unprecedented leadership shakeup, but here's what really went down. That morning, just before the meeting, I found Elise alone in Dad's study. She was standing by his desk, holding his old coffee mug, the one with Mom's faded lipstick still on the rim. I never understood why he spent so much time in here, she said softly. I thought he was hiding from the changes happening outside. I didn't realize he was preparing for them. The boardroom filled up by 9:30, faces from our childhoods, familiar, traditional, skeptical, the same people who'd quietly nodded when I walked away to start my company, and quietly judged it ever since. Clara laid out the presentation materials while I set up my laptop. Dad's final letter sat in my jacket pocket. Unopened, he'd written one thing on the envelope. Wait until after. The meeting opened exactly as Dad predicted. Resistance from the old guard, thinly veiled concerns about preserving legacy, doubts about our experience, our vision, our ability. We'll let them talk. And the longer they talked, the clearer they made our case. Then I shared the numbers, not just the recent dips, but the full picture analysis Dad had compiled, showing the unavoidable collapse of traditional models. The room went still. Clara followed with the legal groundwork, outlining how competitors were already making quiet moves, positioning themselves for the new market reality. Even more silence. Then Elise rose. Every board member leaned in, expecting her to defend tradition. Instead, she calmly walked them through the transformation strategy, step by step, showing how my startup's tech could not only integrate into, but revitalize our entire foundation. That's when the uproar started. This is absurd. Harvey, one of Dad's oldest friends, exploded. Richard would never. I pulled a folder from my bag and opened it on the table. Actually, this whole strategy came from Dad. I said, he spent the last 3 years building it. Quietly, carefully. You could hear the breath leave the room. But we weren't done. Remember those stock certificates? Turns out Dad had been buying up shares for years. Through quiet acquisitions, trust layers, and strategic buys, piece by piece, he built a controlling interest. Clara walked them through the voting rights analysis. I watched the color drain from Harvey's face. Even if you control the board vote, he stammered, you'll never convince the institutional investors. I smiled and clicked the final slide. Actually, we already did. Dad's strategic plays weren't just about foresight. They were relationships, partnerships, quiet alignments with key investors who weren't just on board. They were energized. That's when Mom walked in. The board members instinctively sat up straighter. They'd always respected her, maybe even feared her. Not because she spoke often, but because when she did, everyone listened. Richard knew this day would come, she said calmly, taking her seat without asking. He prepared for it. Now the only question is whether you want to be part of what's coming or cling to what's already gone. The vote wasn't close. By noon, the old guard was gone. Our transformation plan, approved, control stayed with the family, but the direction was entirely new. My company was folded in as the innovation wing. Elise took charge of legacy operations, and Clara became our strategy lead. But the most powerful moment came afterward. Back in Dad's study, the place that had watched us grow, fight, drift apart, and find our way back. We opened his last letter together. To my children, if you're reading this, it means you've finally seen what I saw in you all along. That legacy isn't about preserving what was. It's about building what's next. Elise, your strength. Clara, your insight. Miles, your vision. Alone, you're impressive. Together, you're unstoppable. The old guard never understood that tradition without innovation is just slow decay. Let them resist. Their fear proves exactly why they need to step aside. Miles, what they called your failure was really your breakthrough. You had the guts I didn't at your age. Elise, your devotion to what we built is admirable, but legacy must evolve. Clara, your clarity, your sense of patterns will help guide the transformation. This study wasn't just filled with memories. It was your crucible, the place where you'd either fall apart forever or finally come together. I'm proud of you all. Love, Dad. That afternoon, the news broke. The stock shot up 30% by close. Harvey and his crew tried to stir up noise in the press. Didn't last. Mom released decades of Dad's research. Page after page showing how the very people resisting change had nearly driven the company into irrelevance. Within days, they resigned. Turns out Dad had also documented every questionable move they ever made. The delays, the self-dealing, the willful blindness. As Mom put it, the best revenge isn't humiliating them. It's proving just how little they ever mattered. Now, 6 months later, we're not just surviving, we're leading. Our newly integrated company is reshaping the entire industry. The same voices that once mocked my startup, they're now playing desperate catch-up. Every week, Elise, Clara, and I meet in Dad's study. We argue, we laugh, we build. Sometimes Mom joins us, watches us with that knowing smile, sipping coffee from a new mug. But we kept Dad's old one too. The one with the lipstick on the rim. It still sits on his desk. A reminder that real legacy isn't frozen in time. It lives, it shifts, it grows. That's what he left us. Not just a company, not just a plan, but a truth. Family legacy isn't something you protect by holding it still. It's something you shape together, even if you have to break it first. As for the ones who once called me a failure, they're welcome to watch our success from the cozy retirement homes they retreated to after the dust cleared. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't tearing down your enemies. It's building something so undeniable, they're forced to sit back and watch. Dad would have loved that. Thank you for following this story. Some of you asked for more, but this feels like the right place to close the chapter. The future's here, and we've got work to do.